it's Ilana and welcome back to my channel. So this was not the dating related video that I had planned for today. Last night on TikTok, I stumbled across a video that really hit way too close to home. And it was a montage of BBYO members, which was a Jewish youth group that I did when I was in high school. And it enraged me. This whole video is about addressing the toxic and terrible hookup culture that happens within Jewish youth groups. So normally on this channel, I do talk about what it's like to navigate life and dating in Portland and San Francisco. Also just navigating life in general in those cities. So if you're single navigating the dating world, or maybe you're thinking about moving to any of those two cities, go ahead and subscribe down below. But without further ado, let's go ahead and address into a really serious topic. I actually spoke about this topic on my private Facebook account on a post about toxic hookup culture in Jewish youth groups. There is a really great organization out there that was started by a couple of Jewish teen women who came together to form Jewish Teens for Empowered Consent. I will link their website and their Instagram account down below. I highly recommend that you check them out and even give them a follow because they have lots of great information and resources regarding this topic, and they even share a lot of anonymous stories of people's experiences in Jewish youth groups. They're not sponsoring this video in any kind of way. I'm just simply giving them a shout out because they deserve the recognition and they're spreading such a really important message that needs to be taken more seriously. I do talk a lot about dating on this channel. And I know most of my target audience members are not teenagers. I don't even think most of them are even Jewish. But from time to time, I do get teens stumbling on my videos. If you are a teenager, especially in a Jewish youth group that's watching this, I really hope that you take everything that I have to say with a lot of heart and you take it seriously and you relay it back to your organizations to put an end to this. Let's kind of talk about BBYO. That was the organization that I was in, but there's other organizations that are just as guilty. So USY and NFTY are a couple of other ones that also are involved with this toxic hookup culture, but I'm just going to talk about from my experiences within BBYO. So originally I never wanted to do any kind of Jewish youth group when I was in high school. It sounded really lame to me, but then when I heard some of my Jewish friends that I went to high school with kept talking about how much fun it was, they'd always talk about the conventions that they came back from and how amazing they were and how they were making so many friends and that they were meeting really hot boys. So it started to kind of gauge my interest, and I started to have this FOMO mentality that I was really missing out on such a great opportunity for leadership skills, to make connections, to get involved outside of my high school, and to get away from my own personal hell at my public high school, but hopefully find a safer place amongst Jewish people. I was definitely, of course, interested when they said that there were a lot of hot guys and that they were making out with boys. And I was thinking, oh, well, I'm single. I still want a boyfriend. Maybe I can make out with boys there since none of the guys in my grade wanted to make out with me in the first place. Really, really sad, terrible way of thinking, but just wanted to be honest. That's kind of what sort of piqued my interest. So I'm going to use the phrase hooking up throughout this video, and the way that I'm going to define hooking up is simply kissing and making out, nothing more than that. I know everyone has their own definition of what hooking up means, but for the context of this video, hooking up means making out and kissing, because that's how us teenagers defined it when we were in the organization. So I got involved halfway through my freshman year. I started off a little bit later, so I had missed out on a lot of different events and conventions. So I was able to attend my first and last convention of the year, and it was just a statewide convention. It wasn't a regional convention where I got to meet people from North Carolina. I had heard a lot of things about conventions, that this is where the hookups really happen. The dances are important, but you'll still get to make friends, and there's lots of fun programming, and you basically spend your time there at some sort of, a camp. So you're staying in cabins, you're basically having all these programmings at a camp facility. You're surrounded by all sorts of nature where you can get away with a lot of stuff, if you know what I mean. I remember when I arrived at this convention, dinner was just starting, and I sat down at a table full of people I didn't know because, again, I was there to make friends. And I wanted to meet people. And there were a bunch of guys there. So me being me, wanting to meet boys, I sat at a table with a bunch of guys. So I started chatting them up, getting to know them. And there was this one guy who I was making conversation with and I was friendly with throughout this entire convention. And when it came to the infamous dance, we ended up dancing together. And I will get more into these dances in just a little bit. But to kind of give you a little bit of what happened, basically he wanted to kiss me and I did not want to kiss him. I realized I was actually not interested in hooking up at this convention whatsoever. And ever since I rejected his advances, he was rude to me throughout the rest of our high school career. And what makes it even worse is that he eventually went after my sister 2 years later, and she said no, so he got rejected by the Pinsky sisters. And yeah, it just goes to show you that there was a lot of entitlement that some of these boys had back then, where if you rejected their advances, they were gonna treat you like crap. And that never felt good. My relationship with this guy was terrible because I rejected his advances and we just simply didn't get along for the rest of our time within high school together. That can give you a little bit of a taste of how toxic this hookup culture really is. So while we're on the subject of these dances, let's talk about that. So the dances is where a lot of these hookups happen. Basically, there would be a DJ, they would turn the lights off in the room, and it was just a great way for all of the teens to engage in grinding dancing and to kind of, make out with people and engage in any kind of like romantic or sexual activity right on the dance floor for everyone to see. At the time, I didn't realize how inappropriate and disgusting this was, and there's nothing wrong with dancing. I think it's the fact that how hypersexual these dances became, that is what is disgusting about it. And just so we're clear, I'm a very sex positive person, but the thing is, these Jewish youth group organizations are actually very sex negative, and there's a lot of shaming that goes on, and there's a lot of pressure to engage in hooking up with other individuals. I really liked grinding. I thought it was really fun. I loved to shake my butt. Better yet, loved doing it on guys. I was kind of discovering my own sexuality as a teenager at the time. Just being the Scorpio that I am, I'm a little bit really intense when it comes to my dancing, and I really like to move my body. Men made fun of me for it with the way that I moved my body, that I was basically too much for them because, well, they couldn't keep up with me. I was teased relentlessly due to my dancing, but it was totally fine when the hot popular girls at my convention, they were doing the exact same thing that I was, and nobody cared what they did. But when I did it, it was considered a problem. It was a huge double standard, and it severely upset me because I was turned into this laughing stock that a lot of guys had to take a risk with me when they wanted to dance with me because I was too crazy and I moved too quickly. That's just how I dance. Like, if you can't keep up with me, not my problem. So there was this one convention, and basically this is where all the chapters do skits and dances. And when a certain male chapter did a skit for the entire convention to see, they basically called me out on my dancing, and I was really humiliated and embarrassed and hurt. And I immediately stood up and yelled at them, interrupting the whole skit, saying, "You're done. Stop. This isn't funny." And the whole room just kind of went silent, and I kind of destroyed their skit, and I wasn't the least bit sorry about it. And one of the members who I was friends with at the time ran up hugging me, being like, "Ilana, we were just kidding. It's just a joke. It's just a joke." And I'm like, "It's not funny. What's funny about making fun of my dancing? That's how I dance, and I'm not ashamed or embarrassed about how I dance. But when you have to make a joke about it and humiliate me for hundreds of teens to see, it really takes a toll on you and it makes you feel really shameful about yourself. So that just gives you an example about these dances and how people will make fun of you for engaging in the grinding activity. I have heard that some grinding at certain regions, especially in my old region, that it's a thing of the past, but I know it's happening elsewhere. I'm glad to see it's dying, at least in my old region, but at the same time, it still really concerns me that teens are still getting pressured to dance like this. Otherwise, they're considered invaluable because they're not engaging in the experience. Another hookup opportunity at conventions was something called Hofesh, which is basically the free period where teens get a break and they're scheduled to do whatever they want. And a lot of teens who were interested in wanting to hook up with people would use this time to do that. So the code word that people like to use to one another was, "You want to go for a walk?" aka, let's go off together and find a spot to make out. There were so many places where you could get away and wander off with somebody else to hook up with them. And I found it to be a little bit dangerous because these adults who are running these conventions are responsible for the teenagers. And when you're letting teenagers wander off somewhere, not knowing where they are, I find that to be very, very concerning and very dangerous. Some teens would discover certain things off the campus of wherever a convention was. Adults wouldn't know about it and they weren't able to keep track of teens. And I found this to be very problematic. Like, just why wasn't anybody speaking up about this? It really blows my mind. I don't know why I didn't speak up about it, probably because I was too afraid of what people were going to think of me at the time. And I really regret that. If I could go back, I would totally speak up and be far more vocal about this because I am so bothered by this whole entire experience. So at conventions, there's a lot of pressure to hook up. You will hear lots of girls talk about all of their hookup stories and all the boys that they've kissed or maybe went further with, and guys would sometimes do the same. But there was so much dialogue about hooking up and making out with people and doing this and that with certain people. People really wanted to dig deep into your life, get into your personal business, and get the dirt on you. And I made a huge mistake of trusting a bunch of girls who I thought were my friends at the time. And honestly, they're some of the fakest people that I've ever met in my life. But at the time, I didn't know any better. I was very naive and stupid. But there were times where these girls would be like, "Oh, you should hook up with this person. I hear they like you." Or, "Ooh, you and this person, are you gonna hook up with them?" Sometimes I just wanted to be friends with guys. And I would get shamed for having a male friend platonically, and they would pressure me to do something that I was just completely uncomfortable with. There were no boundaries or any kind of knowledge of consent when I was in my youth group. But when I would hear these other girls talk about all of their experiences and I hadn't really kissed boys yet, it made me feel really undesirable. I felt like I wasn't pretty enough because there were guys that didn't want to kiss me. At the time, 15-year-old Ilana thought that her worth was determined by male validation and attention. And that's so sad. I just want to tell 15 to 17-year-old Ilana that your worth is not based on what men think of you. But at the time, I had learned this toxic behavior that this was the case. I never felt pretty to any of the guys, and there were some guys who enjoyed making it known to me that they were not interested in me. And it was really humiliating to get rejected at conventions when there were guys that I was interested in wanting to hook up with, and when it was known that these men were not interested and that I failed to hook up with somebody, the whole entire convention pretty much knew, and I got made fun of for it. And it was really embarrassing and not fair. Also, these kinds of actions made me kind of scared to want to hook up with somebody at the same time. And I am going to get into why I was also afraid to hook up with people at the same time. So let's kind of go to my own personal experience. It was the summer before my junior year started, and I finally made out with somebody at a convention. And we had made out during that free period, Hofesh, and we went on the walk, and we kind of walked away from where everyone else was to have some privacy. Of course, people still found out about it, and it basically spread like wildfire to the people who weren't even attending the convention. I was really scared as to what was going to happen because I knew that my region was very notorious for exploiting people at our business meetings on who decided to hook up. Every Sunday morning at the end of the convention, there are these teen-led business meetings. There's usually about 1 or 2 adults in the room, but the teens lead the whole entire meetings, and it's the regional or council board that does it. So at the end of the meeting, there is something called a hookup list, and people will pass the list around if they knew of any couples that made out during the weekend. And people knew about my situation, and it was announced to the whole meeting. And it was really embarrassing, and I didn't know how to handle it. I was really hoping that a hookup list was not going to happen, and it happened, of course. And then we fast forward a couple months later, I made out with the same guy at a regional convention, and I got teased mercilessly because of it. And another reason that people made fun of me for making out with somebody was because of the guy's weight. People made fun of his weight, and I found that to be really up. I didn't care about what his body looked like. I had somewhat of a connection with him at that time where it lasted a couple months to where we wanted to reignite that later on. And again, I still got made fun of. And a lot of reasons as to why I got made fun of it, again, was because of the size of his body. And my sister was the one that had to confirm that to me. I don't know how he felt at the time or if he was aware of why people were making fun of us, but that was a reason that was confirmed to me, and I just can't imagine what he was thinking back then. Maybe he didn't care, but I knew that I cared because I thought the whole situation was fucked up. Like, why does it matter what the size of his body is? You're not the one that's making out with him. Like, this was between me and him and my connection, and it's honestly just nobody's business. But at this convention, again, was on the hookup list, and people also referenced during this business meeting how we made out under a table behind a chair. Yeah, I mean, that happened, but I was basically anonymously called out for it at the meeting, even though everyone knew that's was being talked about. I was the subject of that event, and it was absolutely humiliating. Just let me be, like, let me go and make out with somebody because I was genuinely interested in this person. You don't need to exploit me like that and make fun of me in a fucking business meeting. This information has just no business being a part of a business meeting. It happened all the time, and nobody ever spoke up about it. Adults never spoke up about how wrong and problematic this was, that these hookup lists kept going on. I don't know if these hookup lists are still going on in my old region today, but I really hope they're not. It's so humiliating on many, many accounts. Also, at the end of conventions, right when people are gonna say goodbye, we did these chants. So the guys and the girls would separate, and they would form these little circles, and they would do their chants. And let me tell you, these chants were incredibly sexist and misogynistic. I don't even want to repeat some of the chants, but they were disgusting and vile. Adults never ever stopped them. It makes no sense. Why weren't adults telling these kids to stop saying these chants? I don't understand. I just can't believe that us as teenagers keep getting away with this or got away with this at the time. It's so problematic. Like, these are teenagers being sexualized, and you're not gonna say or do anything about it? What gives? Another thing that I also hated about these conventions, especially when you attended international programs, there was this point system. Now, I'm not going to talk about the point system because I don't want people to know what you would rank for certain things, but let's just say that it is posted on a specific social media platform and it is there for people to see what the points are worth. And people would make jokes about how much points they were worth. And they think that it's funny and that's what they're validated, and that basically you're accomplishing something by the more points you have, the more valuable you are as a person. Like, some people would search for hookups just so they could get more points. It's so up. I used to participate in those point systems, and yes, I definitely did calculate myself at some point, but I didn't realize how problematic that was. Honestly, at the time, I didn't have a bigger issue with the point system. I had a bigger issue with the hookup list, but looking back on it now, the point system is definitely problematic, and I'm really ashamed for not being able to recognize that when I was a teenager. Let's talk about these summer programs and the international convention, because this is where hookups go crazy. If you thought regional or council conventions were bad, just you wait. Because when you are putting hundreds of teens in a camp, camps are so spaced out, there is so much that you can get away with. And again, adults not knowing where kids venture off to, I find that to be very problematic. But there is a lot of pressure, once again, to hook up with people. I remember 2009, I started dating my boyfriend, and I went to ILTC in Kala. I did those programs back to back. So I was away from my boyfriend for 5 weeks. And I thought to myself, okay, well, now that I have a boyfriend, I don't have to worry about this stupid hookup culture because I have a boyfriend now. No big deal. Nope. Toxic hookup culture still came into play. And don't worry, I did not cheat on him. Let me just explain what happened though. BBYO promotes a lot of heteronormative activity, and it also really excludes members of the LGBTQIA+ community. It's not as inclusive as you would think. When I say that, it's because these Jewish youth groups want to promote Jewish relationships so that they can eventually lead to Jewish babies and continue to grow the Jewish population, because Judaism is actually one of the smallest religions in the world. And they also promoted this idea that interfaith relationships are bad. It's basically the mindset that Jews need to date other Jews and make babies. And that necessarily doesn't work when you're part of the LGBTQIA+ community. And it makes them feel very left out and secluded. My boyfriend was Christian. When boys found out that I was dating somebody who wasn't Jewish, they went off on me. I got shamed by 1 or 2 guys for not dating somebody that was Jewish. They made me feel terrible about my decision for having a non-Jewish partner. And some of them even convinced me that I should cheat on him. And I'm thinking, what the fuck? No, I'm not gonna cheat on my partner. Like, I've never had a boyfriend before. I'm gonna stay faithful to my partner. And let me tell you, it was very hard to be away from my boyfriend at the time for 5 weeks, where I had limited contact with him. It was really tough. And what made this even worse is that there were a lot of folks who went into these summer programs with relationships and they cheated on their partner. I don't think there were even conversations to be had saying, hey, I'm about to make out with somebody that's not you, we need to break up. I don't know if those conversations happened, but from what I heard, basically it seemed like all of these people who went into this Pearlman summer, that's what they called it if you did both of those programs together, they all cheated. And that's problematic. I really wanted to call people out for cheating because that's completely unacceptable. The fact that you couldn't control yourselves and remain faithful to your partner, I found it to be so problematic and wrong. And nobody cared that people were cheating. I found it to be incredibly up, and it made me really comfortable throughout my 5 weeks there, because it just made me miss my boyfriend, making me wish that I could be with him at the time, because I couldn't hook up with anybody. There were a lot of guys who didn't respect that I had a boyfriend. I had guys who would take my head and they would push it down towards their private area, and I said, stop. The kind of harassment that I experienced, and they were saying, well, I'm just kidding, and no, there's nothing funny about trying to force a girl to give you and to make a joke about it. There were so many guys that would literally beg me for that, and I said, no, I'm not gonna do that. Like, I have a boyfriend. Can you please f off? So there were no boundaries. A lot of these people didn't understand what consent was, and that's problematic. So problematic. And now let's talk about IC. So IC is basically the International Convention where a bunch of people from all the summer programs reunite at this hotel. There's about like thousands upon thousands of teenagers packed in this hotel. It's a really fun event, and they usually host it during President's Day weekend. It's very fun. For the 2 years that I attended, there were 2 dances. They had one during the opening night and then one on the last night. And of course, those dances is where all the makeout sessions were occurring, but also people were making out during the Hofesh periods, and they would wander around to like a secluded area of a hotel to find somebody to make out with. Now that TikTok has become big and more teens are using the platform, this is basically why I'm having this conversation, because last night I stumbled across a TikTok video of a hookup montage from a teen in BBYO, and I was appalled. So I found 2 actually, and there was this one girl. I'm going to show it to you here so you can see it. I'm going to blur out the faces of all the individuals because these are minors, so you can see how problematic this is.
Well, let me get this straight. You think that killing those guys is funny?
I do. And I'm tired of pretending it's not.
I'm so happy that someone wanted more pictures, because obviously I love to embarrass people. So here are a selection of my favorites. They aren't selfies, but they're very fun.
And then when you see her follow-up video, she's like, I like to embarrass people. How is that okay? Do you not see how problematic that is? The other video that I saw, which I'm not going to share because I just don't think it's right to share this again, even if I do censor them out. But basically, it was a picture of a girl saying how excited she was to go to international convention. And then afterwards, it's a montage of a bunch of teens just making out with one another. The fact that you were posting montages without people's consent and exploiting and exposing them for hundreds of people to see, depending whether or not the video goes viral or not, it's absolutely wrong. And what makes it even worse is that these teens think it's so funny to exploit their peers on an app where a video has potential to accidentally go viral. It's so humiliating, and if you see people doing this, I really encourage you to tell them why this is problematic and to ask them to take the video down. This one girl who posted the montage of all the teens making out said that TikTok had originally deleted it, so she decides to re-upload it. I wonder why TikTok decided to take it down. I just want to know, like, where are the adults in this situation? This is what blows my mind, is that adults have done absolutely nothing to inform these kids on how to have a safer and healthier experience when it comes to building relationships. I believe a lot of adult staff in BBYO has failed our youth. And again, I am not shaming any teenagers. Teenagers, they're gonna experience sexuality. They're gonna make out with people. I am all for sex positivity. I am all for teenagers wanting to discover their sexualities and to discover relationships and to build relationships. I think that's important. That's how you learn and grow as a person. But the problem is that they're very uninformed about certain actions, and the fact that BBYO and other Jewish youth groups are very sex negative, when we need to educate our teens on how to have a more sex positive and an inclusive environment that's not so heteronormative. We need to teach teens more about the power of consent. We need to teach them how to have positive and healthy experiences. We need to teach people to not exploit people who choose to engage in wanting to make out with somebody at a convention. Leave these people alone. Don't embarrass them at business meetings through Hookup List or videos and upload them onto social media. That's not okay. These Jewish youth groups need to work on being more inclusive and not engage in such heteronormative practices. I can't imagine how the LGBTQIA+ youth are feeling when they attend these conventions and how unsafe and how excluded they feel because it's not the norm and that they may not find somebody to engage in the hookup culture with because it's so heteronormative. We need to do better. Adults, do better. If you are staffing these youth groups, do better. There are so many programs that are hosted at these conventions. Host programs about consent, about building healthy relationships, and making conventions a safe place for teens to explore their relationships and their sexuality without being shamed for it. We just need to stop accepting this kind of behavior overall. If you are in a Jewish youth group and you feel comfortable sharing your story down below, feel free to go ahead and do that. Again, check out the Jewish Teens for Empowered Consent. If you liked this video and you thought it was insightful, please make sure you give it a thumbs up, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!